Ambassador Viral Kith stood behind the thick glass wall of her observation room and watched a human ship dock at Concord Station. Her forearms trembled slightly. She had spent her whole life studying alien species, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The creatures from Earth had finally arrived. The Silthani people had known about Earth for 300 years. Their scientists had watched it from far away, taking notes and shaking their heads in disbelief. Earth was classified as a Category 12 death world, the most dangerous type of planet that could still support life. The gravity was crushing. The atmosphere was filled with oxygen, a gas so reactive that it caused fires and rust and slow decay. The temperature swung wildly between extremes that would kill most species. And everywhere on that terrible world, predators hunted prey in an endless cycle of violence. Yet somehow, impossibly, intelligent life had evolved there. Not just survived, but thrived. Viralkith watched as the airlock opened and the humans walked out. They moved with a strange confidence, their two legs carrying them forward in a smooth rhythm. Their eyes scanned the docking bay, always watching, always alert. These were the eyes of hunters. Captain Elena Vasquez led her crew onto Concord Station with her head held high. She was a tall woman with dark hair pulled back tight and a face that showed no fear. Behind her walked Commander David Okonkwo, her tactical officer, and Dr. Sarah Eulerin, her chief scientist. They wore simple gray uniforms with the flag of United Earth on their shoulders. The aliens in the docking bay moved away from them. Some pressed themselves against the walls. Others hurried through doors and disappeared. Vasquez noticed this but kept walking. She had expected it. The Galactic Concord had debated for 50 years before allowing humans to join. Most species had voted against it. They argued that humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too violent. The reports from Earth showed a species that had spent most of its history fighting wars against itself. They built weapons of terrible power. They ate the flesh of other animals. They kept predators as pets and called them friends. But the Concord needed new members. The old civilizations were declining, their populations shrinking, their innovation slowing. Humanity offered fresh energy, new ideas, and resources from a world so dangerous that no other species would claim it. So the vote had passed barely, and humans were granted provisional membership. Provisional. The word meant they were allowed in but not trusted. They could visit Concord Station, but not settle on established worlds. They could trade, but not join the major economic unions. They were members in name only. Viralkith met Captain Vasquez in the greeting chamber. The human smiled at her, and Viralkith fought the urge to step backward. That smile showed teeth. On every civilized world in the galaxy, baring teeth was a threat display. It meant aggression, danger, violence. But humans did it to show friendliness. The contradiction made Viralkith's head hurt. "Ambassador," Vasquez said, extending her hand. "Thank you for welcoming us." Viralkith knew about handshakes. She reached out with one of her upper arms and let the human grip it. The strength in those fingers was alarming. Humans were built for endurance and power. Their ancestors had chased prey across open plains until the animals collapsed from exhaustion. They were persistence hunters, the most terrifying kind. "Captain Vasquez," Viralkith replied, keeping her voice steady. "The Concord welcomes humanity. We hope this visit will build understanding between our peoples." The words were diplomatic and empty. Both of them knew it. Over the following weeks, Vasquez and her crew tried to make connections with the other species on the station. They attended diplomatic functions and introduced themselves politely. They shared information about Earth and asked questions about other worlds. They were friendly and curious and eager to learn. It did not matter. The aliens kept their distance. Vasquez sat in the station's common area one evening, drinking a cup of coffee. A group of Varric traders sat at a nearby table, speaking in low voices. She caught fragments of their conversation. "Deathworlders," one of them said. "Did you see how she eats? She tears food apart with her teeth." "They sleep," another added. "Every single day, they fall unconscious for hours." "How has anything not killed them?" "Because they killed everything else first." Vasquez set down her cup and stared at the wall. She had known this would be hard. Earth's government had warned her that acceptance would take time. But knowing something and feeling it were different things. She had traveled across the stars to meet new civilizations, and those civilizations looked at her like she was a monster. Commander Okonkwo found her there an hour later. He sat down across from her and said nothing for a long moment. "They're afraid of us," Vasquez finally said. "Yes, we haven't done anything to them. We came in peace. We followed every protocol." Okonkwo nodded slowly. "They evolved on paradise worlds, Captain. Stable temperatures, gentle gravity, no predators. They cannot understand what we are. To them, we are impossible. We are nightmares that walk and talk and smile." Vasquez laughed bitterly. "So, what do? We keep trying. We show them who we really are. And we hope that someday they see past the fear." The days continued. The humans explored the station, learned its systems, and mapped its politics. They discovered that the Concord was old and slow, governed by councils that took years to make simple decisions. The member species had grown comfortable in their safety. They had not faced a real threat in thousands of years. Then, on the 43rd day of their visit, everything changed. Vasquez was on the observation deck when the alarms began. Red lights flashed across every surface. A voice spoke in a dozen languages, repeating the same message over and over. "Long-range sensors have detected incoming vessels. Classification, unknown. Trajectory, direct approach to Concord space." The aliens around her began to panic. They ran for exits, called for information, clutched at each other in fear. Vasquez stood still and watched the data scroll across the screens. Ambassador Viral Kith appeared beside her, trembling so badly she could barely stand. "You do not understand," the Sulfani whispered. "Those energy signatures. We have seen them before. In the old records. From before the Concord existed. What are they?" Vasquez asked. Viral Kith's voice broke as she answered. "The Harvesters. They have returned." The name meant nothing to Vasquez, but the terror on every alien face told her everything she needed to know. Whatever was coming, the galaxy had faced it before, and the galaxy had lost. The war room of Concord Station was filled with frightened beings. Representatives from 30 different species sat around a massive circular table, their voices rising and falling in waves of panic. Holographic displays showed the approaching fleet, thousands of vessels moving through space like a swarm of metal insects. Captain Vasquez stood against the wall with her crew. Humans had not been invited to this emergency session, but no one had stopped them from entering. The aliens were too afraid to care about protocol anymore. High Counselor Thrax of the Morphine Collective raised his tentacles for silence. He was ancient, his gray skin hanging loose on his frame, but his voice still carried authority. "The records are clear," he said. "The Harvesters return every 50,000 years. They consume all biological matter in their path. They strip worlds bare and use the resources to build more of themselves. Then they disappear into the void between galaxies and wait for life to grow back." A Dreth commander slammed his fist on the table. "Then we know what to do. We evacuate. We flee to the outer rim and hide until they pass." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Heads nodded. Plans were already forming: evacuation routes, priority lists, supplies to gather. Vasquez felt a cold anger building in her chest. She looked at Okanku, who wore the same expression. Dr. Euleron was studying the tactical displays with narrowed eyes. Ambassador Varalkith stepped forward. The last harvesting killed 1,000 civilizations. Only those who fled fast enough survived. Our ancestors left behind everything they had built. They hid in the dark spaces between stars for 10,000 years before they felt safe enough to emerge. And you want to do that again? Vasquez spoke before she could stop herself. Every alien turned to look at her. The room went silent. Captain Vasquez, Counselor Therax said slowly, you do not understand. The harvesters cannot be stopped. They have never been defeated. Every attempt at resistance has failed. Have you tried? The question hung in the air. Therax blinked his large eyes several times. The records show many civilizations attempted to fight. All of them were destroyed. The records are 50,000 years old, Vasquez replied. Technology has changed. You have ships and weapons your ancestors never dreamed of. Why not use them? A Silphani diplomat made a sound of disgust. You humans. You think violence is the answer to everything. This is not a problem that can be solved with guns and aggression. Then how do you solve it? By running? By hiding? By hoping the harvesters get full before they reach you? Commander Okonkwo stepped forward to stand beside his captain. We have studied your tactical data. The harvesters are machines. They follow patterns. They can be predicted. And anything that can be predicted can be fought. The Dreth commander laughed harshly. Spoken like true Deathworlders. You come from a planet where everything is trying to kill you, so you think you can fight anything. But this is different. This is extinction. We know what extinction looks like, Okonkwo said quietly. We have caused it. We have nearly suffered it. Our world has killed 99% of all species that ever lived on it. We are still here because we learned to fight back against everything that tried to destroy us. Dr. Euleron pulled up new data on the holographic display. The harvester ships have weaknesses. Their armor is strong but not invincible. Their reaction times are fast but follow predictable algorithms. If we could coordinate a strike force, target their command vessels, disrupt their communications, enough. Counselor Therax raised his tentacles again. The Concord will not waste resources on a hopeless battle. Our duty is to preserve life, not throw it away in foolish gestures of defiance. The evacuation will begin immediately. All member species are ordered to prepare their populations for departure. Vasquez felt her hands clench into fists. And what about the species who cannot evacuate? The ones without enough ships? The colony worlds that are too far from the escape routes? Therax looked at her with something that might have been pity. Sacrifices must be made. We cannot save everyone. We could try. The room erupted in arguments. Species shouted at each other, blaming and accusing and demanding priority in the evacuation order. Vasquez watched it all with growing despair. These beings had built a civilization that spanned the galaxy. They had technology that Earth could barely imagine. And they were going to run away without a fight. She turned and walked out of the war room. Her crew followed Dot in the corridor outside. Viralkith caught up with them. The Silphani ambassador looked exhausted, her forearms hanging limp at her sides. Captain, she said, I am sorry. I know this is not what you wanted to hear. Vasquez stopped walking but did not turn around. How many will die? In the evacuation? Millions, perhaps. The outer colonies will not receive ships in time. The harvesters will reach them first. And you accept this? Viralkith was quiet for a long moment. We have no choice. Fighting the harvesters is impossible. It has always been impossible. That is simply the truth of the universe. Now Vasquez turned. She looked at the alien ambassador, and for the first time, she did not hide the predator in her eyes. She let Viralkith see what lived beneath the diplomatic smile. "On Earth," Vasquez said, "we have a saying. Impossible just means no one has done it yet." She activated her communication device and sent a message across the stars, to relay stations and quantum links, all the way back to the small blue world where humanity had learned to survive. The message was simple. The galaxy is under attack. They will not fight. We will die. 12 hours later, Earth's response arrived. It was not a message of sympathy or concern. It was not a diplomatic statement or a request for more information. It was a declaration of war. The United Earth Coalition was mobilizing. Every ship, every soldier, every factory and laboratory and research station was being turned toward a single purpose. Humanity had heard that something was threatening the galaxy, and humanity had decided to do what it always did when faced with extinction. It got angry. Vasquez read the message and smiled. This time, she did not hide her teeth. The harvesters were coming. They had destroyed 1,000 civilizations. They had never been stopped. They had also never met humans. Earth had never moved so fast. Within 1 week of receiving the message, the United Earth Coalition had transformed itself. Factories that had been building cars and appliances and consumer electronics shut down and reopened as weapons plants. Shipyards that normally took 2 years to complete a vessel were now finishing them in 3 months. Scientists who had spent their careers studying black holes in distant galaxies were suddenly designing shields and armor, and new ways to kill machines. Admiral Chun Wei-Lin stood on the bridge of the UES Victory and watched her fleet assemble. 3,000 ships hung in formation around Earth's moon, their hulls gleaming with fresh armor and their weapons loaded and ready. It was the largest military force humanity had ever gathered, and it was still not enough. The Harvester fleet numbered in the tens of thousands. Every tactical projection showed humanity losing. The odds were impossible. Admiral Chun had built her career on impossible odds. She was 62 years old, with gray hair cut short and a face marked by decades of service. She had fought in 3 different wars on Earth before humanity reached the stars. She had lost friends, made hard choices, and learned the most important lesson any soldier could learn. Wars were not won by numbers alone. They were won by will. The alien observers from Concord Station had arrived to watch humanity's preparations. They floated in small shuttlecraft at a safe distance, their sensors recording everything. Ambassador Viralkith was among them, along with representatives from a dozen other species. They could not believe what they were seeing. "They are actually going to fight," a Varick observer said, his voice filled with confusion. "They know they cannot win, but they are fighting anyway." Viralkith watched a human supply ship load ammunition into a destroyer's cargo bay. The workers moved with speed and purpose, shouting to each other, laughing at jokes she could not understand. They did not look like beings preparing for death. They looked excited. "It is their nature," she said quietly. "They evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. They do not know how to give up. That is not courage. That is madness. Perhaps. Or perhaps they see something we do not." On the Victory, Admiral Chun addressed her commanders through the fleet communication system. Her voice was calm and steady. "I will not lie to you. The enemy outnumbers us. They have technology we do not fully understand. They have destroyed civilizations that were old where our ancestors were still living in caves. By every measure that matters, we should lose this war." She paused and looked at the faces on her screens. Human faces, young and old, scared and determined, all of them waiting for her to tell them why they should believe. But here is what the Harvesters do not know. They have never fought something like us. They have faced species that evolved in safety, in comfort, in worlds that nurtured them. They have never faced something that crawled out of hell and learned to thrive there. Admiral Chun's voice grew stronger. We are the children of a death world. Our planet burned us, froze us, poisoned us, and shook the ground beneath our feet. It threw predators at us, diseases at us, disasters at us. And we survived. We did more than survive. We conquered that world and made it ours. The harvesters think they are the ultimate predators. They are wrong. We are. We have been hunting since before we could speak. We chased prey across endless plains until they collapsed from exhaustion. We tracked animals through forests and mountains and deserts. We learned to work together, to communicate, to plan, because alone we were weak, but together we were unstoppable. Today, we hunt machines. The first battle happened 3 days later at the Verith system. The harvesters had reached a Concord colony world, a peaceful planet of farms and small cities. The evacuation ships had not arrived in time. 2 million aliens were trapped on the surface, waiting to be consumed. The human fleet arrived first. Admiral Chun split her forces into 3 groups and attacked from multiple angles. The harvester response was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of drone ships launched from the main fleet, swarming toward the human vessels like angry insects. The battle was chaos. Human ships fired and dodged and fired again, their crews working in shifts because there was no time to rest. Harvester beams cut through armor and hull plating. Explosions lit up the darkness of space. The cruiser Jakarta took a direct hit that sliced it in half. For any other species, that would have been the end. But the human crew sealed the breaches with emergency foam, rerouted power through backup systems, and kept fighting from the surviving section. They refused to die. Marine boarding parties launched toward the nearest harvester command ship. They wore heavy armor and carried weapons designed to tear through machine bodies. They cut their way through the hull and fought room by room through corridors filled with deadly defenses. Sergeant Maria Santos led her squad into the heart of the harvester vessel. The air was thin and filled with toxic gases. The temperature fluctuated wildly. Automated turrets fired at them from every angle. Santos had grown up in the mountains of South America, where the air was thin and the cold could kill. She had trained in deserts and jungles and frozen wastelands. This was just another hostile environment. She pushed forward. Keep moving, she shouted. They can replace their machines. They cannot replace their command core. Her squad reached the central processing unit and planted their explosives. 3 of her people died holding the corridor while the charge is armed. Santos carried a wounded soldier on her back as they fought their way out. The harvester command ship exploded 15 seconds after they reached their shuttle. Across the system, similar scenes played out. Human ships rammed harvester vessels when their weapons failed. Engineers performed repairs while under fire, their hands steady despite the danger. Pilots flew until exhaustion clouded their minds, then drank stimulants and flew some more. The alien observers watched in stunned silence. They should be dead, the Varick observer whispered. By every calculation, they should have lost hours ago. They do not calculate, Virokith replied. Her voice was strange, filled with an emotion she could not name. They simply refused to lose. After 17 hours of continuous combat, the harvesters did something they had never done in 50,000 years of recorded history. They retreated. The machine fleet pulled back from Verith, leaving behind thousands of destroyed drones and dozens of crippled command ships. The human fleet was battered and bleeding, nearly half its vessels damaged or destroyed. But they held the system. Admiral Chun sat on her bridge and stared at the sensor data. Her hands were shaking. She had not slept in 2 days. Send a message to the colony, she said. Tell them they are safe. On the surface of Verith, 2 million aliens looked up at the sky where human ships had formed a protective wall. They did not understand what had happened. They did not understand how the monsters from the Deathworld had saved them. But they knew one thing for certain: the harvesters could be beaten, and the humans were just getting started. The war lasted 3 years. After the victory at Vareth, the harvesters changed their tactics. They spread out across the galaxy, attacking multiple systems at once, forcing the human fleet to split into smaller groups. They learned from their defeats and adapted their weapons and defenses. They began targeting supply lines and communication relays, trying to cut the humans off from each other. The humans adapted faster. Commander David Okonkwo led a strike team deep into Harvester territory. Their mission was to destroy a communications hub that coordinated attacks across an entire sector. The hub was located on a dead moon orbiting a gas giant, surrounded by defensive platforms and patrol ships. Okonkwo's team consisted of 50 soldiers in 3 small assault craft. They approached the moon using the gas giant's radiation belt as cover, letting the interference hide their signals. The journey took 6 days. The radiation made everyone sick. 2 soldiers died before they reached their target. Okonkwo buried them in space and kept going. They landed on the dark side of the moon and marched 12 kilometers across frozen rock to reach the hub. The temperature was -200 degrees. Their suits protected them, but the cold still seeped through, making every step painful. A Silthani observer who had volunteered to join the mission collapsed after the first kilometer. Okonkwo carried her on his back for the remaining 11. The attack on the hub lasted 45 minutes. Okonkwo's soldiers fought through automated defenses, sealed corridors, and emergency response drones. They planted charges in the central processor and fought their way back out. 17 humans died in the assault. When the hub exploded, harvester coordination in that sector collapsed. 3 colony worlds that had been marked for consumption were saved. Okonkwo returned to the fleet with 31 soldiers and 1 Silthani observer who could not stop crying. She had watched humans die to save worlds that were not their own. She had seen them joke with each other while bleeding from wounds that would have killed her species. She did not understand them, but she had begun to respect them. Back on Concord Station, the mood had shifted. The aliens who had once avoided humans now sought them out. They asked questions about Earth, about human history, about how a species could be so willing to sacrifice itself for others. Captain Vasquez spent her limited rest time answering these questions. She told them about wars and disasters and plagues that had shaped humanity. She told them about firefighters who ran into burning buildings and doctors who treated diseases that might kill them. She told them about parents who starved so their children could eat, and strangers who donated organs to people they would never meet. "You see us as predators," Vasquez said to a group of young Dreth cadets. "And we are. But we are also protectors. On Earth, the strong defend the weak. It is not always true, and we fail more often than we succeed. But it is what we strive for." One of the cadets raised a clawed hand. "Why? What do you gain from protecting those weaker than you?" Vasquez smiled, and this time the Dreth did not flinch at her teeth. "Nothing. That is the point. We do it because it is right, not because it benefits us." The cadets looked at each other in confusion. On their world, every action was calculated for advantage. The idea of sacrifice without reward made no sense to them. But some of them began to understand that Dr. Sarah Euleron worked without rest in her laboratory on the Victory. She had been studying harvester communications for 2 years, and she was close to a breakthrough. The machines used a complex encryption system that had resisted every attempt to crack it. But Euleron had noticed patterns, tiny irregularities that suggested a weakness. She worked for 72 hours straight, sleeping in 15-minute intervals at her desk. Her assistants begged her to rest. She ignored them. Every hour she wasted was an hour the harvesters used to kill more people. On the 73rd hour, she found it that the harvester communication system had a flaw. Their encryption relied on a shared key that was distributed through their network. If that key could be corrupted, their entire communication system would fail. More than that, Oilerin realized she could use the corrupted key to send false commands, turning the machines against each other. She called it the Babel virus. Admiral Chan reviewed the research and saw the potential immediately. But delivering the virus was a problem. It had to be injected directly into the core of the harvester network, which meant reaching their home system. That system was located in the Galactic Center, surrounded by the largest concentration of harvester ships ever recorded. "It is a suicide mission," said Admiral Chun's chief of staff. "Yes," the admiral agreed. "But it is also our only chance to end this war." Meanwhile, on the front lines, something unexpected was happening. Alien volunteers were joining the human forces. Not many at first, just a few individuals who had seen humans fight and wanted to help. A Sylphani communications officer who could process signals faster than any human computer. A Varric engineer who had spent his life designing ships and now wanted to repair them. A Dreth medic who had trained in combat medicine after watching human soldiers save her colony. They could not match human endurance or strength. They could not survive the conditions that humans shrugged off as normal. But they could contribute in other ways, and the humans welcomed them without hesitation. Ambassador Viralkith joined the crew of the Horizon. She did not know why. She told herself it was to observe, to record, to bear witness to whatever happened. But deep down, she knew the truth. She wanted to be part of something greater than herself. She wanted to matter. Captain Vasquez assigned her to the communication station. "You are part of this crew now," Vasquez told her. "That means we protect each other. Understand?" Viralkith did not fully understand, but she nodded anyway. The fleet gathered for the final push. 3 years of war had reduced the human forces by half. But the survivors were hardened veterans who had fought the machines across 100 systems. They had lost friends and family and parts of themselves. They were tired and scarred and haunted by what they had seen. They were also ready. Admiral Chun addressed the combined fleet one last time. Human ships and allied vessels from a dozen species hung in formation, waiting for the order to move. "We have come further than anyone believed possible," she said. "We have fought an enemy that destroyed civilizations, and we have pushed them back. But the war is not over. The harvesters still exist. As long as they exist, they will return. Today, we end them." She paused and looked at the faces on her screens. Human and alien, young and old, all of them bound together by 3 years of shared suffering and shared purpose. Some of us will not survive this. I will not pretend otherwise. But what we do today will save trillions of lives. It will protect worlds that have not yet been born. It will give the galaxy a future. That is worth dying for. The fleet moved toward the Galactic Center, toward the heart of the harvester swarm, toward the end of everything, one way or another. The harvester home system was a nightmare made real. A massive artificial structure sat at the center, a machine world built from the processed remains of countless civilizations. It was larger than most planets, its surface covered with factories and processing plants and storage facilities that held the harvested resources of 50,000 years. Around it orbited thousands of harvester vessels, from small patrol drones to massive command ships the size of moons. Admiral Chun's fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. The humans and their allies looked at the enemy forces and knew the truth. They were outnumbered 20-1. Their tactical computers calculated their survival odds at less than 3%. No. One turned back. The battle began immediately. Harvester ships swarmed toward the fleet like antibodies attacking an infection. Human vessels broke into attack formations and pushed forward, their weapons firing continuously. Explosions filled the void of space, brief flowers of light that bloomed and died in the darkness. Captain Vasquez commanded the horizon from her position near the center of the fleet. Her ship had been upgraded with the latest weapons and the strongest shields, because it carried the most important cargo in the galaxy. Dr. Eulerin sat at a console on the bridge, monitoring the Babel virus she had created. The virus was stored in a specialized container, ready to be uploaded into the Harvester network. But first, they had to reach the machine world. The fighting was brutal. Human ships fell one after another, their crews fighting until the last moment. The destroyer Santiago rammed a Harvester command ship after its weapons failed, the captain ordering his people to evacuate while he steered the vessel into the enemy's heart. The cruiser Johannesburg held a defensive position for 3 hours while evacuation shuttles rescued survivors from damaged ships. Its hull slowly torn apart by enemy fire. Ambassador Viral Kith worked at her communication station, coordinating signals between the Allied ships. Her 4 hands moved across the controls faster than any human could manage. She had never felt so alive, so purposeful, so terrified. "Horizon, you have an opening," she reported. "Sector 7, bearing 245. The enemy has pulled ships to reinforce Sector 3. Captain Vasquez checked the tactical display and saw the gap. It was narrow and would not last long. But it was enough. "All power to engines," she ordered. "We are going through." The horizon accelerated toward the machine world. Harvester drones tried to intercept, but the ship's weapons crews shot them down. A beam struck the port side and tore through 3 decks. Damage control teams rushed to seal the breaches while medical personnel carried the wounded to sickbay. Commander Okonkwo led the ship's marine contingent to the shuttle bay. His mission was to board the machine world and protect Dr. Eulerin while she uploaded the virus. He had 50 soldiers left from the original crew. It would have to be enough. The horizon reached the machine world and entered its atmosphere. The ship shook violently as it descended through layers of toxic gas and electromagnetic interference. Below them, the surface stretched to the horizon, a landscape of metal and machinery that had consumed the organic matter of 1,000 worlds. They landed near a massive structure that Dr. Eulerin had identified as a primary network node. Okonkwo's Marines deployed around the ship, while Vasquez led a smaller team toward the structure's entrance. "Captain," Okonkwo said through the communication link, "we have incoming." "Lots of incoming." Vasquez looked back and saw Harvester defense units emerging from openings in the ground. Hundreds of them, then thousands, all converging on the horizon. "Hold them as long as you can," she said. "We need 20 minutes. You will have them." Vasquez turned and ran into the structure. Eulerin followed, carrying the virus container. Viralkith came last, clutching a weapon she barely knew how to use. Inside, the corridors twisted and branched in patterns that made no sense to organic minds. The walls hummed with energy. The air was thin and cold and smelled of metal and death. They fought through automated defenses, following Eulerin's scanner toward the network core. Vasquez took a wound to her shoulder that would have stopped most people. She wrapped it with a bandage and kept moving. The network core was a vast chamber, filled with glowing conduits and pulsing machinery. At its center sat a massive processor, the brain of the Harvester Collective. "This is it," Eulerin said. Her hands were shaking as she connected the virus container to an access port. "I need 5 minutes." Harvester units began pouring into the chamber. Vasquez and Viralkith positioned themselves between the machines and the doctor, firing at everything that moved. 3 minutes, Eulerin called. Vasquez's rifle ran out of ammunition. She drew her sidearm and kept firing. A harvester blade caught her leg, and she fell to one knee but did not stop shooting. 2 minutes. Viralkith felt a strange calm settle over her. She was going to die here, in this terrible place, surrounded by machines that wanted to consume her world. But she was going to die fighting alongside the Deathworlders, who had shown her what courage truly meant. 1 minute. Vasquez was out of ammunition. She picked up a piece of broken machinery and swung it at the nearest harvester, smashing its sensor cluster. The machine fell, and she grabbed its blade and turned it against its companions. Upload complete. The effect was immediate. The harvester units in the chamber froze. Then they began attacking each other, their movements jerky and confused. Throughout the machine world, the same thing was happening. The Babel virus was spreading through the network, corrupting the collective intelligence that controlled the swarm. Oilerin collapsed against a wall, laughing and crying at the same time. It worked. It actually worked. Outside, the battle was turning. Harvester ships were breaking formation, firing on each other, crashing into the machine world's surface. The human fleet, battered but unbroken, pushed through the chaos toward Victory Dot, but the horizon would not escape. Vasquez received the damage report and understood. The ship was too damaged to reach orbit. The machine world's defenses were still active enough to destroy any vessel that tried to leave. Someone had to stay behind and make sure the virus finished its work. She ordered the surviving crew to evacuate in escape pods. Most of them refused. "We are not leaving you, Captain," Okonkwo said. "That is an order, Commander. Then court-martial me later." In the end, Vasquez could not force them. She could only watch as her people chose to stay, chose to die beside her rather than leave her alone. Viralkith stayed too. When Vasquez asked her why, the Silthani ambassador simply said, "You showed me what family means. I will not abandon mine." The Horizon's last transmission reached the fleet as the machine world began to tear itself apart. Captain Vasquez's voice was calm, almost peaceful. "The virus is spreading. The Harvester network is collapsing. We have done what we came to do." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Tell Earth we did our duty. Tell the galaxy the humans keep their promises. And tell them not to mourn us too long. We knew what we signed up for. It has been an honor." The transmission ended. Seconds later, the machine world exploded. The memorial service was held on Concord Station 1 year later. Every species in the galaxy sent representatives. The chamber was filled with beings who had once feared humans, who had kept them at distance, who had called them monsters and Deathworlders. Now they came to honor them. Ambassador. Viralkith's name was read alongside the human dead. The Silthani delegation wept openly, something their species almost never did in public. A human representative read the final words. He was young, barely old enough to serve, but he had lost his parents in the war and had volunteered to speak for those who could not speak for themselves. "They called us Deathworlders," he said. "They were right. We come from a world that kills. But we learned something on that world that the Harvesters never understood. We learned that life is precious because it is fragile. We learned that the strong must protect the weak. We learned that some things are worth dying for." He looked at the alien faces in the crowd, at the representatives of species that had once rejected humanity. "My people gave their lives for yours, not because they expected gratitude, not because they wanted something in return. They did it because it was right. They did it because that is who we are." The memorial listed every human and allied soldier who had died in the war. Over 2 million names, carved into walls that stretched for kilometers. At the base was a simple inscription chosen by the human delegation. "We came from a hard world. It taught us that nothing worth having comes easy. It taught us to protect each other. And when we found we were not alone in the universe, we learned the only lesson that mattered. Family is not about blood. It is about who you are willing to die for." The Concord voted unanimously to grant humanity full membership that day. But the humans who attended the ceremony said the vote did not matter. They had not fought for membership or recognition or power. They had fought because the galaxy needed them, and in the end, that was enough.